welcome everyone to AEON Presents Lynn Juggernauts. This is the first series out of a monthly podcast that we're going to bring to you now. And I wanted to tell you a little bit more about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to prioritize and amplify specific voices in the community, specifically those impacted by racism, homophobia, transphobia, police brutality, and other forms of injustice or trauma. And obviously we're giving priority to small business owners at this time. And so especially if they're small business owners of these marginalized communities, it's even better. So let me know if you would like to participate. You can always email us at getaeonhelp@gmail.com. But enough about this podcast. We want to hear from Miss Faustina Cuevas. Welcome to this conversation. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here, especially with a resource like your office and what you provide for the community. Mental health is also a really big, important thing that we need to be talking more about, especially in communities of color. So I also just appreciate what you're trying to do here and what you all are doing for our community. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. The sun is still shining, so we're here.
Well, you have been chosen for this because you are either from Lynn or you own a business in Lynn. Tell me a little bit more about your background and where you're from.
Yeah, in this case, I'm both. In this case, I am from Lynn. And I am a business owner. So I was actually born in Salem next door, but have lived in Lynn literally my whole life, except for a time in my adulthood where I left Lynn. When I went to college, I kind of did that 18-year-old thing where you just never come back. So I went to school at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and there I got my bachelor's degree in psychology and Spanish. And then I stayed for another 2 years and I got my master's degree in higher education administration. That's just a fancy, really loaded title to say I was qualified and certified to work with college-age students on a college campus. And that's sort of what I did for the last 10 years. I worked on a variety of topics, centers, spaces on a college campus. You name it, I did it. I worked with students who lived on campus as a residence director. I worked in multicultural affairs. I worked doing academic advising and career advising, sort of dabbling a lot of different arenas and functional areas in higher education. And I did that for the last 10 years. And I was gone. I sort of jumped around. I lived in Connecticut. I lived in Minnesota. But my heart was always in Massachusetts. My heart was always at home and coming back to Lynn. So I feel like, I went out, experienced the world, brought back a lot of skills, grew a lot. And now as a professional, as an adult, I'm so excited to be back in my community and being able to bring back everything I've learned.
That's so important. And one of the things that we really want to feature and amplify is more professionals who come back to Lynn or grow up in Lynn and are in that track. I'm talking about like lawyers, engineers. We want people working in sciences. I mean, I want to see Lynn explode in a good way with all sorts of amazing professional businesses. And I think you're one of the people who really stuck out to me. And thank you so much for joining the Lynn Juggernauts. At this point, we're just gonna go for it. And I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Jenn Nakhai, and I'm the founder of AEON Counseling and Consulting. Thank you for giving me a little shout out there when I forgot to do so. But we have a super interesting topic for today because Miss Faustina Cuevas, the founder and owner of FC Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Consulting, has a fascinating role, and nobody ever does consulting around that. And I know enough people to count in one hand who practice or who are even comfortable talking about these topics publicly. And to make that your career, I just want to thank you again. And let's jump in to our topic for today. So this week, the President of the United States announced a war against anti-racism training.
Yes.
And look at that. That is what you do.
Right.
Can you tell us your reactions right away? Because you were the first person I thought of when I heard this. I was like, oh, first of all, that sounds super crazy to me. But also, why would we be anti-racism?
Right. So there's a lot of feelings. My initial reaction was is this real? Is this a hoax? That's really, anytime I hear anything about Trump, I always have to really triple Google and make sure that it's accurate and it's not some foolery. In this case, it was not. It was real. He put out a memo to all executive branches of, part of the government. And if folks, there's a lot of language that people throw out. And when we think about executive branches, we think about sort of the arms that are under the presidency. You think about the Justice Department, education, housing and urban development, things like that. Those are the sort of the branches that he's talking about, that he sent this memo to. And basically, to sort of summarize the memo, and folks should definitely look at the memo. It's a 2-page memo. And to summarize the memo, he basically said he will not be funding any sort of training that has anything to do with bettering and making our world more inclusive, in short, right? He named specifically things about white privilege, anything that says that any race is racist. So apparently he doesn't want anyone talking about racism because we live in a colorblind society and we shouldn't see race, which we know is not true, especially given our current political events that have been happening. We know for a fact that's not true. We witnessed it with our own eyes, racial discrimination, racial bias, implicit bias. We've seen it over and over again. So it's really dangerous to put out a memo like that and say there will be follow through, because that's part of the memo. It wasn't just sort of a memo, read it if you want, digest it as you want. It was, here's a memo and we're going to put out guidelines on how we're going to not fund you if we find out you're using any federal money to train folks that work in these sort of spaces. Wow. And again, I say dangerous and I don't say that lightly.
Yeah.
I don't say that lightly. In my work, in my time doing this, I have seen the importance of having these sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings to move organizations forward, to move them ahead, to make it more inclusive for people from different backgrounds, including race, including sexual orientation, including gender. So it is very important. And I think people get stuck in, well, what does this mean? It's not a big deal. And it actually is a big deal. Some of these things really matter for those most affected. So when you're telling a group of people they can no longer have these trainings that are going to help them understand difference and help them understand how to work with their colleagues who are different than them, we're setting a very dangerous precedent about what it means to be different in a workspace, what it means to have a marginalized identity in a workspace. Yes.
I don't even know.
It's intense.
What to say other than I am so sad about all of this that I don't know what else to do other than make another podcast and keep talking about it. Exactly. And for this current administration, white fragility, defund the police. Mm-hmm. Let's see what other buzzwords we can put in there. White supremacists should not be around, and also let's see what else they wouldn't like in this pocket, but this is not federally funded, so we're good.
Right.
Let's see what other racism. We're going to talk specifically about racism.
There's a lot of buzzwords, and I want to read just a little excerpt from the memo because I thought this was really ironic and almost laughable. So it says, and I quote at the end, "The president has a proven track record of standing for those whose voices has been long ignored and who have failed to benefit from all our country has to offer. He intends to continue to support all Americans, regardless of race, religion, or creed. that divisive, false, and demeaning propaganda of critical race theory movement is contrary to all that we stand for as Americans and should have no place in the federal government. I think the first part of that sentence is really laughable. And I say that because we know this president has not supported people of all races, creeds, and religions, right? I mean, even for coronavirus, he was calling it the Chinese virus. We have Chinese Americans.
Yesterday, like 4 times in a row.
Right. We have Chinese Americans. How does that rhetoric resonate with our community members in the Chinese community? What does that mean for them? Are you being inclusive when you're saying that? How are you giving them, like, what are you saying? And he created this sort of rhetoric around that other, conservatives started using that and running with that. And because of that, we saw an increase of violence toward our Asian community members, a very heavy increase. I mean, there was a huge peak of discrimination, violence, assault. You saw everything. And that was because of him saying that Chinese virus, that we saw sort of that peak in that sort of violence and targeted violence against the Chinese community. So how is it that you can say in the same breath that you're committed to every member of our community, despite race and creed and religion, blah, 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 and then also be part of the problem? So this is why I'm saying it's laughable and ironic. And that's why I'm saying it's dangerous, right? If we do not have trainings like this, which bring awareness to these issues, bring awareness to how deeply ingrained our own implicit bias is, right? Because we're taught, we're socialized to believe certain things. And over time, we believe those things to be true. And unless you have someone like me and other amazing colleagues who do this work as well, other consultants that come to you and say, actually, you were trained to think that way for X, Y, and Z, right? So let's unpack all of that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about where your implicit bias comes from. And when you don't have that, when you're saying you're not going to spend money on folks like us that can come and do that training, you're creating oppressive environments and you're upholding these sort of status quo ideas and policies that keep people oppressed. And that is dangerous. Like, that is in itself very dangerous.
Racism can be systemic and it can definitely be industrial, right? Like industrial racism, when you see it in your workplace, which is the worst, and you feel so helpless because if you speak up, you'll be in more trouble.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's happened to me multiple times.
Get in line, sister.
Exactly.
Get in line. Yeah, and what's important about these trainings too is there's accountability, right? We trained you on implicit bias. So when you come to me and say something, off color, I can sort of say, hey, weren't you at that implicit bias training? Don't you know that that's wrong? Right? You can't claim ignorance, right? Which is what a lot of people do when they get a knock from HR. They claim ignorance. Oh, I didn't know that was offensive. Oh, I didn't mean it that way. Da, 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 da. When you provide these trainings, you built in accountability. And it allows people to say, actually, we had a training on that. You should know better. And there's that accountability measure that could be part of somebody's evaluation, right? It could be part of somebody's mechanism of sort of building a report towards someone who is problematic in the workplace and saying, we've done these things, for years, and you still don't want to change. And you're creating a hostile work environment for these people. So you need to stop doing this. And if they're told they need to stop and they continue to sort of create a hostile work environment, oppress certain groups, then you can say, you know what, there's the door. We talked to you. We have documented here all the instances of you offending people, being racist, being sexist, whatever it may be. And that's a way of holding people accountable. Imagine if these trainings didn't exist.
I mean, what if the people in the very top are the ones perpetrating it to begin with? Because I think for an organization like ours, for instance, something like that would work because that's what we stand for and that's in our mission statement.
Right.
But for an organization, like a for-profit organization that is led by a white supremacist, and only hiring white supremacists, and maybe they have a couple staff here and there, maybe they need that Spanish-speaking staff, maybe they need that staff from a particular area of the world because they speak that language and their services are catered to that particular community. All of a sudden, we're kind of profiting off of people's labor and disrespecting them as they're giving us a service that we cannot provide, right? So if anything, these people should be almost like, I don't know, protected,
right?
More than usual.
That's a very interesting even point that you make, because people hire me and I will get like private messages and they will say, well, everything you just said, that's my supervisor. Or everything you just said about microaggressions, it's my supervisor aggressing me. So one of the things I do train on is how to supervise up and how to be able to hold people accountable. And I do that through talking about solidarity, talking about how do you sort of align yourself with other like-minded colleagues to hold people accountable, right? There's strength in numbers, especially if it's somebody in a power position who's causing the aggression or who's oppressing you. Or creating a hostile work environment. So we talk about those strategies on how to sort of build that allyship with other folks in your workspace that feel the same. And in some cases, it's been successful, right? They're able to say, well, I'm not the only one that feels this way. X, Y, and Z feels this way as well. Or they go united to talk to this person in the power position where they, 2 to 3 people say, hey, we all want to talk to you because we all feel this way. You said this joke to me, this person, and we're not laughing. It's not funny. It's sexist, and we want you to stop. And there's sort of like a moment of like, this person has to sit with that. Like, oh, it wasn't a one-time isolated joke, haha, that they were never going to find out about. You've been saying this joke to other people as well.
And then come the accusations of insubordination.
Yep.
And then the plot thickens. Yes. And so interesting. Definitely, if you have the option of being in a union at work, please do
opt in
and support. Opt in.
Opt in.
I know I've talked to so many people who are like, why do I have to pay $10 a month? Because these are the people who are going to be there for you in the event that you need a lawyer. Yeah. So for sure, you want to opt in.
Absolutely.
I have a little quote that I think makes sense for right now, and it is that in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. So I've been hearing a lot of, well, she grew up in Maine and, she's not going to know about the differences. And it's just like, well, I'm sure she at some point watched TV or had access to Google. So I really don't want to hear it. At this point, there is no excuse. And I'm kind of very disappointed in Lynn's solidarity around women, around people of color, around women of color, especially anything LGBT. And we're not even there yet.
Girl, one step at a time.
Let's start with like just 51% of the population, women.
Right.
Women.
Right.
I'm seeing super catty stuff for no reason. I'm seeing people tear each other down, and then and this has been the latest thing, when aggressions do happen that are not micro, or aggressions do happen that are not covert, these are very much in your face, documented, written down.
Right.
What I'm seeing is a lot of people siding with the oppressor and being like, no, the white man he must be okay because sometimes he does charity. I'm like, well, Donald Trump does charity too every once in a while. So I don't know. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but there's still an aggression here based on gender or race and gender, which is extra fun, or any permutation of intersectionality of problems that we can think of. And so what I'm seeing is, even within my own friend circle, is that we are not standing together. And when we don't stand together, we lose.
We lose and we fall. Yeah, I think it's very interesting because, like I said, I was gone for a while and then coming back and sort of being super excited about diversity, equity, inclusion, and really doing this work and doing it in my community. I was sort of saddened by the lack of solidarity with various communities, and um, almost sitting with confusion as to how such a diverse community can't stand together. And I think we have a lot of work to do. I'm hopeful because there's a lot of amazing activists in Lynn and people that I looked up to and admire deeply that care and are not going to rest until, you know, we're thinking about racial equality in Lynn specifically, and thinking about what does that look like and envisioning that together. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what those folks are going to do and how I can play a role in that. Because I've offered my services. I've offered city councilors to come and do trainings on implicit bias and microaggressions.
What did
I've
they
offered
say? What did they
up in the
say?
air. It was
What
up
did
in the
they
air. There's
say?
no response. But I've offered my services. People know that I do this work, that I want to do this work, and you know, I think I'm good at it. People keep rehiring me, so I might be doing. I believe I'm doing something right. I worked with Century 21 Tradition in Lynn with their real estate agents. So every sort of sector in our society is thinking about this. So we have no excuse, right? When real estate agents are thinking about this, we have no excuse for other sectors of our society to be thinking about this and really processing this information. And again, you have people that want to do the work. Let them do the work. I was really disappointed with the disbanding of the Racial Justice Committee in Lynn. I just think it's a really, you know, and I'm going to be mindful of how I talk about this, because I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. Da, 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 da. All I know is Lynn Item wrote an article and I was upset about it. And I responded to the city council, the president, who happens to be my ward counselor as well, Ward 3. And I was really disappointed. And it's been quiet from him. And I just think he's doing a disservice to all of us who are directly impacted by this committee, people who look like me, who are directly impacted by this committee. For him to go ahead and disband that, I think is extremely harmful, and it needs to be reinstated immediately.
That is such a direct, like, aggressive action.
Mm-hmm. And to say it was because of a disagreement, whatever, it doesn't matter. What does matter here is that these conversations need to be had, and it's not going to be a sing-along, kumbaya, happy ending. It's not like that. This work is messy. It's painful at times. It's uncomfortable. And every time I've done this work, I tell people, if you're feeling uncomfortable, I am doing something right. We are doing something right. That discomfort is going to allow you to grow. You sit in that discomfort, and I promise you, you're going to grow. Right? If you run away from the discomfort, if you disband a committee, no one's going to grow. No one's going to learn anything. And you're just leaving the table because you're uncomfortable. And we know, right? So there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do. And you know, I even wrote, I don't know, I commented on somebody's status that had posted about it, that they were also upset. And I said, listen, if they need an outside facilitator, I'm here. I'm available. It's what I do. I have 10 years of training in this world, right? Because another problem is we want to have these conversations and we want to have people moderate them who also have stake in it. So you're coming in with a biased lens already, right? If you have a stake in it, you're going to feel a certain way and you're going to come off a certain way, and people are not going to receive that well. You need to sit at the table with everyone else and let somebody else lead that discussion. Okay. So that's never going to be productive.
This whole idea of like, well, now we need moderators and we need people in the middle. Nothing good has ever come from standing in the middle. Right. We're talking about aggression, verbal, spiritual, financial assault. We're talking about hatred. We're not just talking about, I don't like you because you have different opinions. It's more of like, I don't like you because you exist. I disagree with your existence, and that's just not gonna fly with me. And I don't understand how we got to this again, right? This is history kind of repeating itself. We already know how it went the past couple times. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why we're surprised.
If you have somebody that can name what's happening in the room, right? When feelings are flying and emotions are flying, which is all valid. We're talking about people's livelihood. So let's not police people's emotions. And I'll put and, I won't say but, and how do you have somebody that can sort of name what's happening, right? This is what I'm hearing from you, and this is what I'm hearing from you, and let's decipher what I'm hearing. If you don't have that, it's going to be this, this, and each side is going to have their version of accounts of what happened. And then what ends up happening is we're just going to disband because it's just too much. It's just too much. It's too many emotions, too many this, too many that. And that's the easy way out. We've always taken the easy way out, I feel like. And that's why we're in the situation we're in. That's why people are so unhappy. I won't say people, I'm going to be specific. I think that's why a lot of people of color in Lynn are so unhappy with policies, with government, with counselors. There's just a lot of just unhappiness, I will say, about how things are, because when we start making strides, people sort of bail and it's left in the air, and that's not necessarily fair for the people that have the biggest stake in this, and whose, again, livelihoods sort of depend on the policies and things that are coming out of these sort of working committees.
For the record, according to the U.S. Census, 68% of Lynn is people of color. So
I wouldn't even question that. Like, I wouldn't even like, I wouldn't even question it because it's very high. Oh. I know it's very high.
People fight with me about this. I'm like, I've been working in Lynn for multiple years, especially like in the front lines. And it's like, no, it's definitely mostly immigrant. So, I just need to clarify that. And that's according to U.S. government census data. So, can't trust anybody more than the government.
And I would also challenge that we're all immigrants. Only Native Indigenous people are the original people of this country.
Right.
We're all immigrants.
Out there. So basically, who is your ideal client? Like, what would be the best person for you to work with right now? Who do you want to work with?
I will work with anyone that is open to change, that is willing to listen, that wants to do this work authentically, and is not just checking off a box for their organization, right? If you're just going down your list and you're like, okay, need to do this, need to do that. Oh, we need a diversity training, don't hire me. I'm sure there's other consultants that would be more than happy to take your money. I am not one of those people. I want to work with people who have plans to implement what we do together, because I call this a collaborative work that we're doing together. I work with people who are wanting to listen, who are inviting their employees because they want to be there, that it's not mandatory, because that never is successful. It creates a very hostile environment for me, because there's going to be people in there who are just like countering everything I'm saying. And that's really exhausting for me. And I don't want to work with an organization that's sort of not ready there. They're not there yet because they sort of haven't talked to their staff about why this is important. So that pre-work needs to be done internally first before you invite in a consultant in to do that work. Kind of like what you said about your consulting company. You have a statement. You have sort of a stance of where you are in thinking about social justice. So that's really a beginning space that's saying, like, as an organization, this is why we care about this, is why it's important, because of the demographics we're serving, or the people we're serving, or our community here, and our colegas that are diverse, whatever it may be. But I'm willing to work with anybody who is just, I'm willing to work with you if you're willing to grow and be pushed to change. I am somebody that is really passionate about this work, but I provide tough love, and I will be honest about what the needs are. I will be honest about what needs to be done. And I will definitely push you to your goals of change and creating more inclusive work environments.
I know that the first response that people are going to have, especially business owners, when they hear about your type of consulting is, how much is this going to cost me? And we don't have to go into the details. I just want to let people know that this is a lot more affordable than a lawsuit. This is a lot more affordable. And actually, I have found that there's a great return on investment, because when you invest in your employees, the product or the service that you will provide will come back at you, sevenfold, maybe more. So if you have the overhead, I suggest you spend it on this, because it's a beautiful process and a great conversation. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
No problem. I really appreciate it. And I agree. Please invest in your employees, because I've seen the morale too change. And when we have these conversations, people feel like they have a space to be themselves. which sometimes they're told that they can't be their whole selves at work. So having these sort of spaces where they can express themselves freely really changes morale too.
Amazing. Thank you so much. How can people reach you? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, Instagram. My Instagram handle is FC_DEI consulting. And that's really the best place. Otherwise, also another good place is FaustinaCuevas.com. That's my website. And you can see my first name there spelled out, Faustina. Last name is Cuevas.com. Or again, FC_DEI consulting on Instagram. Those are the two best places to find me. I'm happy to, I do free consultations, the initial consultation to figure out if we're a good match, figure out pricing and all that jazz. So feel free to check me out.
Amazing. I will tag you on everything so you guys will have access to her. Thank you so much. And this is Lynn Juggernauts for you. Expect to see only greatness in here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and let's work together to build a more inclusive and amazing world that our children, that we can leave it in better hands for them. So thank you.
Yeah, everybody please follow her on Instagram, because this consulting agency's Instagram is popping. It's my favorite reblog.
Thank you.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.